Welcome to Amazon Legends, where we have real stories about making it big on Amazon. Our guests are CEOs of large companies and entrepreneurs who became power sellers, also providers specializing in helping sellers, aggregators that acquire sellers, and former Amazonians will give us an insight from behind the scenes. Here is your host, Nick Uresin.
Welcome to another episode of Amazon Legends. My next guest today has been both an Amazon seller and a provider for Amazon sellers. Today, he's the CEO and founder of AMZ Atlas, which is a full-service Amazon agency. When he's not working, his passion is to spend time with his 4 young kids. So I have no idea how he finds time to deal with Amazon, 4 young kids. It's not a handful, it's everything full. So with that, everybody, meet my guest, Corey Thomas. Welcome to the show, Corey.
Nick, thanks so much for having me. It's funny how 4 kids and Amazon, they all are a little chaotic. It's great to be here today.
Yeah, 4 kids. How old are the kids, by the way?
It's 7, 5, 3, and 1. So it is all the chaos you can imagine.
7, 5, 3, and 1. So next year you have another one, do you?
4 is the limit. No more room in the car.
Well, you can't break the algorithm. The algorithm says every 2 years.
We'll pull them behind in the trailer. But yeah, no more seat belts left. So I guess we're done at this point.
Well, I don't know what clearly you do have an algorithm, so I don't know. I trust algorithms more than just human wishes.
There we go.
So when you and I discussed Amazon, you brought up an interesting subject about selling through physical stores, because a lot of brands that become successful, or sometimes those who are building it, they want to sell in big box stores.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
What is the most important thing for a seller to think about and do something about it before they start? If they want to sell through a physical store as well as online?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. And I think it's easy for us in the Amazon space to forget about is we live so much in the everything's about Amazon and optimizing for Amazon. But depending on the strategy that a brand has, if the price gets too low online, it's really difficult to make the leap to traditional retail. And yet retail in many industries still represents 70 or 80% of the total sales across overall retail. So Amazon's grown a lot. E-commerce has exploded in 20 years, but relative to traditional retail, it's still under 20%, even after something like the pandemic. So the most important thing that a brand needs to have is consistency online and offline if they expect to be successful in both places.
So how do you maintain that consistency if you are selling online?
Yeah, so a huge part of that becomes what we talk about as control, and that's control over the presence as we describe it. That's the product listings, the online retailers or marketplaces that are selling. So make sure the product pages look the way that you want. Make sure they're quote unquote, merchandised with good product listings. That's important. That's on the brand's website. That's on Amazon. That's on Walmart. That's all anywhere that someone could find your product online. The other part of that control is over the price. And that's accomplished. And again, it is a process to achieve that, but brands are allowed to have authorized reseller programs with pricing policies that oftentimes take the form of a MAP or MSRP pricing policy. And when those are executed correctly, you can have the product listings online look the way that they need to, so that people recognize the brand, and then they're priced in a way that is cohesive with a retailer that might need the item to sell for $100 because they have 500 retail locations that they have to staff, and their unit economics are different than just an online retailer or an online marketplace. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I have a very interesting question for you.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are selling to if your product is selling in physical stores, you have a buyer you're dealing with, right?
Yeah.
So the buyer gives you a PO, you supply the PO, they pay you in 90 days if you're lucky. And if you are really lucky, you never get a return back from them.
Yep.
Because when the product stops selling, they like to send everything back so that they don't have to pay. So, so you are in the hands of the buyer in terms of your income, so that the buyer keeps giving you a PO, and then you end up getting paid based on your terms. Market takes a nosedive.
Yep.
Stores are stuck with the inventory. They cannot return it back to you.
Yep.
What do? It's a rhetorical question, by the way. They float it, right? They float it.
They do.
So now you have people, because those buyers, they in fact, some companies, buyers buy excess for the purposes of floating back, because that's how they are maximizing their whole operation. So then the next thing is, you've got a bunch of resellers on Amazon, and because the store floated it at a real, they take a loss, they'd rather take the cash, and now stuff is selling dirt cheap, and there you are on Amazon, your own product, and there's no way that you're gonna compete with that kind of situation. So tell me about your take on all this and how you deal with it.
Yeah, and I think, Nick, what I might say is even the thing we see that's a little more common, I would say, because, if a retailer goes out of business, we've all been doing this long enough to see when, if Bed Bath & Beyond goes under, there's going to be some chaos online. Product is going to find its way. And I think in a lot of ways, brands that's a pretty difficult situation to do much about. It'll create chaos, but there is a limit to the inventory. What we find brands struggle with more on an indefinite basis and long-term is when they work with distributors to sell into retail. And most industries in retail are dependent on some form of distribution. And distributors are notorious for adding new accounts. And distributors are very protective of who their retail customers are, because they're concerned about the brand going direct to these retailers and cutting the distributor out. So there's some tension. There's tension between the distributor and their customer list and the brand who wants to know who those customers are to make sure they're not leaking it back online. We find a very difficult thing for a brand to do is those sales in retail are great, but if the distributors are just signing up any retail customer they can find without doing a good job of vetting those customers, those become big leaking holes in a brand's bucket. Where does that come back as? Of course, the DBA reseller on Amazon under a different name that sells for whatever price that they want. So we find, Nick, to address your question, is a retailer going out of business is a challenge. And in some regard, that is a temporary transitory issue. That being said, I think brands should be thoughtful of if a retailer is buying so much inventory that you can, as the brand, logically see how they can move that much inventory. You can also throttle what you accept and allow them to purchase. Don't assume they can be 10 times bigger than they were last year just because they wrote you a bigger PO. That being said, the thing that's more of an issue is ongoing leaky distribution creates sometimes kind of these hidden but permanent challenges that brands have to really be thoughtful about their distributor partners, because it kind of hurts everybody when rogue resellers online are driving the price of the brand's products down.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you is these situations where the retailers are floating excess inventory, that's a fact of life. There is not much you can do about it. And the good news is it's limited to the amount of inventory that they float. However, there are, I know for a fact that especially on like premium brands, some of those like buyers of Costco and Sam's Club, they buy for the purposes of reselling. So that is a constant bleed situation because you don't know. They have a legitimate invoice. They bought it directly from Costco, and now they are on Amazon. They're competing with you. So, but that's a more permanent situation. How do you deal with something like that?
Well, no, I think that there's a good example. Just call it out. I mean, if you look on the top resellers through, Marketplace Pulse is a great source for this. I mean, Petco is a top 100 reseller on Amazon. That's a problem. Like, if I'm a brand, you don't need Petco to sell for you on Amazon. And as a brand, you can have authorization agreements in place with a brand and a retailer like Petco that prevents them from doing that. Now, again, that is the brand and the retailer. Now, how important to you as a brand is Petco if you're in the pet industry? Are you going to throw your hands up and allow them to resell your products on Amazon? Or are you going to take a stance and consider that as something that they're not authorized to do? And you as a brand, if they're breaking your authorization programs of where they're allowed to sell, you have the power to cut off their supply for a reason. But that's the rock and a hard place. We talk a lot about internally with the brands that we work with. It's easy to say, but it's hard to execute on, is the brand's will. Does the brand value control enough to make hard decisions? Because if they don't, at a certain point at the end of a quarter, when they want to hit a sales number, it is easy to run a buy one, get one free on your website. And a lot of people will show up and it'll be a great sales day. And you know what's going to happen is a bunch of that product's just going to get back online, and it's going to hurt you 60 days in the future because you'll have a bunch of resellers you don't recognize. So it is not easy, but I think what we want to do is put the power back in the control of the brands. Know your customer like you're a financial institution, and accept the fact that, hey, look, last year Petco moved 1 million units of this product, and now they want to buy 2 million. Did Petco's footprint really grow twice? Or is it maybe 10 or 20% bigger as more demand goes to retailer? Why are we giving them an extra 50% of product for them to channel online? That just gets in the way of what we're trying to accomplish as a brand. I think brands have to be a little more confident in their decisions.
Yeah, this is always a tough thing. I mean, you on one side, you have the customer being this retailer placing an order with you, and then they are also selling online. Mm-hmm. And you go to them and say, look, I saw you started to sell online, but this is against the agreement. So I want you to stop and say, well, if you don't want us to sell online, then we won't give you any more orders. So now that's the dilemma, right? So
Well, I mean, I think that goes all the way back, Nick, to one of your original questions is kind of how do you balance retail and online? I mean, I think the retailers are nervous about online. They just took a beating over the pandemic, and now they're having their moment as people are going back into stores. These are positive things, but I think brands need a diverse customer base so no one customer gets too powerful. Because all these same dynamics we're talking about play out with a brand's relationship with Walmart or a brand's relationship with Amazon through Vendor Central. Anytime that you've got one customer that's 30, 40, 50% of your sales, that's a precarious place to be as a brand because, retailer going out of business, distribution, all that, those are challenges too. So is the retailer saying, next year we're going to buy for 20% less. Never mind that your cost of goods might have gone up. We just, we're going to private label you and we're not buying any of your product anymore. So I think it's the same. If you're a brand leader, you got to be thinking about a diversified customer base, and having control of the online marketplaces is a huge way to do that, because then you can have healthier retailers that they can be confident that people don't walk through and, hey, look, on my phone, I can see it for $20 less. Thanks for that nice story. I'm going to leave and buy it from my couch. Now they buy it because they're in the store. Like, having a dozen really strong customers is certainly a lot better than 3 huge customers, I think, from a brand's perspective.
Yeah. I mean, this is true. So I always say this to whenever I work with anybody who wants to sell to a retailer. I say, look, or better yet, some people are solely relying on getting a PO from one of the retailers. they don't do any marketing, they don't do anything to create a following or anything like that. And they come up with a great idea, they create a prototype, and then they finally produce the item. And then the next thing is, let's get a PO. Let's start showing it to some buyers, set up appointments. They spend all the time. And the next thing is they get a PO.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's assume the best case scenario, somebody gives you a PO and they put it on the shelf. It doesn't sell. What do you think they're going to do, right?
Yep.
And then I see a lot of entrepreneurs who are not familiar with how these things work. They start complaining, oh, the store is doing nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not up to the store. Store is a channel. What you do is you create a product, and then you create awareness for it, and you say, would you like to buy it? Here is where you can buy it.
Yep.
Your job to drive business to the store. Store is just making it available to them. So don't complain. So that's point one. Point two is, I want to hear all your take on these two things that I believe strongly. Stores are there to maximize their revenue per square footage. It's nothing to do with product. So if the product is not selling or it's not making enough, the calculation is very simple. How much did this real estate generate per square foot? And if it's low, whatever is causing that to be low, they're going to dump it overnight. They're completely agnostic. They don't care about your success. So planning your success solely based on a retailer is not a good thing for the brand. So therefore, I say don't look at that as your primary, as even secondary, maybe down the road. So trusting retailers for your success, and also, going after them first rather than you creating. What are your thoughts about that?
I think you're totally right, Nick. I mean, at the end of the day, we've had huge brands and big conglomerate. I mean, we've had massive companies come to us that we would, as entrepreneurs, wish we had built ourselves. And to hear that they're going to get thrown out of retail because the price online is so low that the retailer can't make any money, to your exact point. If I can't make any money as a retailer, I don't care how important you are, I'm throwing you out. It's not an accident that retailers clamor over themselves to have Apple product or be an authorized retailer or want to carry Bose or these. But if you look online and you look to buy a Bose pair of headphones, it's not like you can find it anywhere for 30% off. Maybe it's a couple bucks here, a couple bucks there, but that is as temporary, and it's a fire sale of a few dollars. That gives retailers confidence to put it on the shelf. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. It's either going to get better with momentum because you have control across all the channels. So retailers are going to want your brand. So the online store is going to look for it. So you have the margin to invest in your own direct consumer site and use extra marketing dollars for your social media. Like that all works together. But if on the other hand, you've got no control online, so retailers are throwing you out, and now you're having to make cost concessions so you don't have any marketing dollars, I mean, that's the death spiral. So it's one or the other. And if you're at a spot as a brand owner where you're like, I'm doing really well on Amazon, but I have no footprint anywhere else, be more than the cheapest, because I can tell you now that if you're just winning because you're the cheapest on Amazon, there's no footprint for you anywhere else. You are now dependent on Amazon not raising their FBA fees too much that you're losing money. That's all you have. So instead, how do you build a brand that people actually pursue, even if you're only on Amazon today? Because now that means more organic traffic. And that also means you could go to a retailer and you could start to look at diversifying your customer base. So no matter whether you're only on Amazon or you're already as a brand in a lot of different retail locations, having your brand be as valuable and sought after as just being the wooden spoon of choice with the lowest price. I mean, the wooden spoon of choice, you're not going to beat somebody who has no marketing collateral and is just doing the most inexpensive thing they can. You've got to build a brand, and building a brand enables you to be successful across a lot of channels. And if you're in a brand that you lack for control, maybe everybody knows you and you're a household brand, but if the price on Amazon, Walmart.com, or the retail store that somebody's in are 10 or 20% different, you have a massive problem that will erode your brand equity so fast. Like, you have got to get the control back if you're in that position so that you don't undermine what you're trying to accomplish on all those channels. Consistency is super important.
Yeah, I think, the key words that I'm hearing from you is control, of course, consistency. Between the two, what other word I'm hearing? It's discipline, right? So
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's very hard for a new seller. It's very hard for an entrepreneur not to have the discipline to say, no, I'm not going to sell to this account.
Mm-hmm.
You just want to maximize sales. And also at the same time, it's so hard to say, well, just offer 20% off for 3 days. So we're not saying don't do it. All we are saying is think it through.
Yep.
What will be the consequences? And then who else did you sell to? Who may be upset? I mean, we all do this, right? So we go buy something, and then a few days later we see it selling at a discount. How do we feel?
Yeah. Yep. Well, I think, Nick, that's a big part of, I mean, you've been in this for a long time. I've been doing it. Nobody wants to hear from the service provider or the consultant this, like, we showed up to be helpful and all we did was point out the things you're doing wrong. I mean, it's meet the brand where they're at. But I do think, to your point, it's illuminating the upsides and the downsides to the decisions. So you want to run a Cyber Monday discount. That makes a lot of sense. But there's a huge difference between running a discount at 15% and running a discount at 40% on Amazon. If you're running at 15%, no one can actually make money buying that because they're going to pay the referral fee based on their price point. So you're not opening the door to 1,000 resellers that bought your product on Amazon and arbitraged it right back onto Amazon. 40%, sure, you'll get extra volume, but half that volume or more is likely bad volume because now you've just given it away at a wholesale price practically online, that all that's going to work against you later in the season. So, I mean, there's reasons for everybody to run their business the way that they need to, and you got to move inventory when you've got to, you got to pay bills as you need to. I totally get that. But it is a subtle difference to run a discount of 15 versus 30%. But yet the control that a brand retains, 15% is something that a customer will value. Yeah. 30% is something that a unauthorized reseller will value. And who are you really doing the discount for? So it's the nuance between, it's not don't ever run a discount. It's run a discount thoughtfully so you don't create yourself a bunch of wholesale customers that you didn't think about, or maybe do a quantity limit of 1 per customer. There's a lot of ways that we as service providers and others can guide the decision. You want to run a Black Friday through Cyber Monday discount. Totally get it. That's valuable in social media. That builds brand equity. But don't do the discount steeper than 18 to 20%, where you're going to get a lot of volume of resellers that are competing with you later in December. That's just that's how it is. Yeah.
Now, another philosophy that I believe, and this is not just for discounting, in general, discount is part of negotiation, really. You negotiate with the customers. Look, why don't you buy my product and I'll give you this much off. So you're really negotiating. So, and I love the subject of negotiation. And I always say this. So we were actually talking internally the other day, one of the team members, and I gave my take on negotiation. I said, negotiation is nothing to do with buying and selling. Negotiation is a fact of life. It's balancing the forces. That's all it is. For example, when you are turning a corner in your car, it's called negotiating a corner, right? When you are talking to your mother-in-law, that you don't like what she says. Well, you don't just say, no, get out of my face. No, you say, you sometimes you say yes, but When you say no in a totally different. So you're negotiating with your mother-in-law. So we are always negotiating. So what is negotiation? Negotiation is, and this goes back to the discount. Somebody wants something, and you want something else, but both of you want the same thing. One wants to buy, the other wants to sell.
Yep.
So car wants to go right, but the forces push you to the left. So what do? You go slowly. Right? You go slowly. So it's the same thing. So if somebody wants to buy, the most important question is not how much they're going to discount, but the most important question is, do they really want this? Does the customer ask, do I really want this? The seller says, do I really want to sell this? So in your case, do I really want to sell this to a reseller? The answer is no. So then what do? Then there's no more negotiation, because you just put the price at what it is, and that's it.
Yep.
So it's finding that balance between what I want and what the other side wants. So here is my philosophy. If I'm gonna give in to the other side, it's never free. They have to do something.
Yep.
In return. So that's the essence of it. So if you want to offer a discount, that means they are receiving something. What are they going to do in return? That means buy in the next 30 minutes, buy only one piece, or you have to buy so many pieces. So, and I see so many sellers offering stuff with no conditions. It's just off, so much off, so much off.
Yep.
So what is your take on the kind of rules that we can implement around offering a discount?
I think the offering a discount rules, quantity is a good one. Time is another big one. I think that we would be kidding ourselves if someone in a seasonal business like apparel is not going to steeply discount product as the season's ending. Like, you could take the high road and we don't discount. Well, good for you. You're going to be sitting on a whole bunch of product for, that's going to see a birthday, as we talk about. So there's always something to be managed in the middle. I think the thing I revert back to is the old sales slogan: people don't mind bad news, they just hate surprises. I think that's what we're kind of obligated to do as a service provider or as an expert in the industry, or a conversation like today is, look, run a discount. Do it during Cyber Week. That's good for your brand, but don't do it at 40% unless you want a bunch of unexpected resellers. To your point, the negotiation there is we need to do it at a price that gets it to the end customer the way that we want, which is drive volume, and we get it in the hands of the people we intended to, which were our customers and consumers, not shadow retailers. Okay, that is the compromise that we made. It's not a 40% discount that our end consumer would even love even more. It's only 20% because it protects our business. The other thing that I think is, part of the negotiation is, what time horizon are you negotiating over? Are you managing your business to flip it in a year? Like, is that what you are? That, I think, is also important. There are plenty of brands that their strategy is, we're manufacturers. This is all we do, and how it gets to the market, we don't care about that afterwards. You do what you want. If you operate your brand or your retailer at a lower margin than someone else, that's fine, but we sell to everybody at the same price. We're a manufacturer. I think that's a totally fine business model. And you're transparent with your end customers about making that happen. But don't then try to be somebody who has a consistent price online as you have in the retail store. And don't mind the phone calls that come from the retailer complaining about Amazon. The negotiation that you have is, everybody buys at the same price. And there's no control over it. So you run your business to the price and the margin you need to, and Amazon or the marketplace will run it for theirs. I think those are all fine, but don't try to be more than one thing, or you're really nothing. And so I think the time horizon and the goals that a brand has is equally very important for them to negotiate with themselves. Are you trying to flip your business and sell it to a PE firm? Well, that probably means you need to show revenue growth and maybe less profit growth. Okay. Or are you you're a family-run business and you want to be in business in 10 years? Well, you probably need to make very different decisions that have a longer-term horizon than somebody who's just trying to make the next quarter. So those are things that I think you have to negotiate with yourself, and not expect to have, you can't have your cake and eat it, so to speak.
Yeah. So in 21st century, everybody is pretty much now free to build a brand focusing on Amazon. To you, what is the right strategy in terms of selling to physical stores?
I think one of the most exciting things that's available to, an entrepreneur starting a brand now is how you can build and use social media to build a brand. Like you have more power as an individual or a small team to build a brand than you ever have. And building that brand and growing your consumer base through your own direct consumer website, but then also on Amazon through a direct selling Seller Central strategy, that's a great place to start. And that's where I would start if I were building a brand today, is my own website and Amazon at the same price that I sell on my website. The thing that I would make sure that I do, however, is I would make sure that I leave enough margin in those price points that I give myself the option of being successful in retail. Because if you're selling a $50 item and you as the brand are only making $5 to $10, that's 10 to 20% margin. No retailer in their right mind is going to carry your product. It's just like, that's not going to happen. And nobody's going to do, they're going to want 30, 40, or even 50% margin when they purchase your product. So if you can't afford to do that, you've already made your retail strategy not worth considering. Instead, if you want to have retailers in your diversified portfolio of wholesale customers, you've got to produce a product that has enough value that you can produce it for that same $50 item, and it only costs you $20 to $25, maybe $30. You need to be making 40 to 60% margin as the brand yourself if you have any hope of breaking into retail. So I think that's important to think about the economics that a retailer has. They're not FBA fees, referral fees, and Seller Central optimization. If you can only win by being the cheapest on Amazon, you're going to have a very tough road going anywhere except for Amazon. And that's fine. Like if that's all that you want to be is on Amazon, great. But if your goal is to not be, reliant on the A9 algorithm and how it changed, you're going to have to sell fewer units at higher margins so that you can have conversations with retailers that says, hey, we may not be the best selling wooden spoon, but we're a wooden spoon that has good margin and it's worth you putting it on your shelf because you don't have a price competition. It's consistently sold for $19.99 every day of the week. You can look back, you use the tools to show your historical sales price, and you're talking to a buyer at one of these retail locations, and you say that price hasn't moved in 2 years. Sure, there's all these brands that come and go that sell it for $9.99 and then they're gone in 6 months, but you can count on if you as a buyer bring our product into your store, you're not going to be undercut online, and you have customers who will be happy with the end product. I think that's super important. And I think that buyers' jobs at retailers is to purchase product that they can turn. They are accountable for the turns that they purchase. So they're certainly not going to go out on a limb for you just because you wanted them to, if you're going to lower your price 60 days later, or there's a history of all this, price negotiation. You got to show them consistency if you ever want to break into retail, and the buyer's incentivized to care about that. So just give them something that shows consistency and control. And now it's very different than most brands that they have to fight over pricing and control all the time. So I don't know. I think that's vital for a brand and an entrepreneur, is to create a product that actually makes money.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you see, of course, who would disagree? You want to create product that makes money, of course. The problem is not that people do things by, creating products that don't make money. They create products, but by the way they run the business, they think they're making money, but actually they don't. So that's the main problem. And the primary reason for that is they don't think it through, mainly because generally behavior. They like to do things, people like to do things quickly. They don't have the discipline to think it through. Another reason is, even if they try to think it through, they don't really understand the moving parts of what may impact. So as a result, somewhere a decision is made, and then suddenly that decision is lurking around, God knows how long, constantly hurting you. So that's the challenge. So let's do a little exercise now that so that we can articulate this a little bit more. So I heard you say just a minute ago, you need to have 40 to 60% margin if you have a retailer strategy in mind.
Yep.
Okay. So let's open that up a little bit. Let's say that you're selling an item, for the sake of argument, $100.
Yep.
So 40 to 60% margin means what exactly? Is it you are buying it for $40 and then selling it for 100? So therefore you are achieving 40% margin? Is that so? That's 60% margin. Or buying it for $60 and then selling it for 100, so therefore you have 40% margin. So is that what you mean?
Yeah, so I can unpack that. Using $100 is a good number. So for $100, if there's any aspiration that a company would ever want to take their products to retail, that brand wants to grow into retail someday, don't expect a retailer to pay more than $60 on that, period. Like the idea that they will accept an item that they purchased for 60 to sell for 100 and make 40%, you're in the ball game. Now you have to make money as the brand, because a wholesale price is no good if you don't make any money. So following that same logic is, a lot of manufacturers work off of 10 to 12 or 15% kind of net margin. So you're likely going to need to be able to manufacture your item and have it with landed cost of somewhere between $40 and $45, so that then you can afford to sell that item to a wholesale account or a retailer at 60 and still make $15 to $20. So there's an old concept in retail, like keystone margin, was your product is supposed to sell for 100. The brand wants to buy it for 50 and you can make it for 25 to 30. Like that was the economic. I don't think we live in a world that can support that. It's become too efficient. It's more likely 160, $40 anymore. Like that's probably where it lies. But if you're trying to sell an item for $100, make sure that you can justify the value of that product to the end consumer, and you can pack enough value in that while getting it to you at a landed cost of $40. You're onto something if you've got that.
Yeah. Okay. So let's now. This is a very good exercise, because I'm gonna take it a step further and expand so that we can see the full picture. So let's say that you've got a product that the retail price is $100, and then you're manufacturing that, or you are the brand owner and you have it manufactured and landed, you're buying it for $40. Let's be optimistic that you are bringing it here at $40.
Yep.
Now you sell it to the store $60, you make $20, right?
Yep.
So $20 profit over a $60 sale.
Yep.
Right. So 20 divided by 60, that's your profit margin, right?
Yeah, that'd be your gross margin, because now you got to think about the marketing, your staff, and all the business is run in that margin. Exactly. Yeah. So that's that's a 33% gross margin for the business.
Okay. So you made 33% gross margin by selling to a store. Now, because it's a store, they're going to purchase. So let's say they give you, I don't know, let's say 1,000 pieces PO.
Yep.
So 1,000 times $40 a piece, $40,000 worth of inventory.
Yep.
Now you have already invested that money when you place the PO, right?
Yep.
And then you're gonna pay much before you get paid. So $40,000 is your cash that you've already invested to make that $20 a piece. $20,000. So $40,000 is invested to make 20,000, you would think that's a good return, except that you have to wait 3 months. Now you've already paid the advance against the PO, blah, blah. So you're already out of pocket, but you haven't seen a dime yet. So you have to wait another 3 months. So now extend that to Amazon. So you are also selling on Amazon. Now take that $40 cost and you're going to sell it on Amazon.
Yep.
You're going to pay $15 for commission to Amazon right off the bat. You're going to pay, depending on the size and FBA fee, let's assume another 15%.
Yep.
So another 15. So we are now up to $30 as the cost of the item.
Yep.
You're going to spend probably $20 on advertising it to build your, 20% takeoffs is a pretty good number.
Yep.
So it's another 20. So now 15 plus 50, 15 plus 20. So we are $50.
Yep.
So at $50 cost, everything else, your overheads, Amazon storage, not even counted yet. So now you have 50, let's say $60 cost. Take that away from, so you made $40.
Mm-hmm.
So your margin is 40%. But you don't have to invest the same amount of inventory, and you get paid every other week, right? And you make more money.
What I think is, from what I'm hearing, actually, Nick, is you actually make less money or about the same. So then we'll kind of do the left and the right. So in the retail, you have $100 price point that you sell into retail at $60 for your $40 product, right? So your net revenue after everything is $20. Same logic. Amazon, it's $100, and you just talked about 15% referral, 15% FBA fees and inbound freight. Now you're down to 70. So before marketing, the wholesale retail channel gives you 60 per unit. Amazon gives you 70 per unit. Now, if you're going to run your own marketing and you're going to pay, to your point, at $20, you're actually now down to $50 per unit into Amazon, of which you paid $40 for each unit. So you're only actually making, in that scenario, $10 a unit because you have the same cost of goods of $40. So now again, that's where the marketing expense at 20% is. That's where if you didn't have to market, you're more profitable on Amazon than you are in retail. You're making $70 a unit on your organic sales compared to $60 of wholesale sales to retail. That is better. But all those invested dollars, those pull that down into almost parity with retail. But I think my point there is selling on Amazon. I think this is the exact thing you said, 5 minutes ago. I think the revenue it's like a sugar high. The revenue on Amazon looks really good, but when you follow that all the way down, you may be making less per unit selling on Amazon for yourself than you are in a wholesale channel, if you go all the way down that math. But I think that's the third leg that's so important there. That referral fee on Amazon of 15% is expensive. Brands also need to be selling through their own website, because if you don't have to pay the 15% and you're not paying such aggressive FBA fees, and you can do standard UPS ground for, half the price of the FBA fee, now you're, instead of near parity around kind of this $50 to $60 price point, and you're making 10 to 15, maybe $20 a unit. Now you're up at 80. Like, you've doubled your margin against any other channel just by selling through your site. Your website is where brands are going to get built and be successful from a profitability perspective through their own website. But the tonnage is going to be done through retail and Amazon and, the Walmart marketplace. So does that make sense?
Well, I have plenty of things to say. So
yeah.
I enjoyed the conversation very much. So first of all, Corey, you missed something.
What'd I miss?
I'm going to make a correction. So in your calculation, you said, so you're making $60 on a wholesale channel and $70 on Amazon channel. Well, actually, you're making $20 on wholesale channel.
Yep. Yeah, because
So
you got the
don't-
cost of goods.
Yeah, so you're making 20. So on the on the retail channel, you have $70 before the cost of goods. So take the cost of, so you have 30. So 20 versus 30.
Yes.
However, on the wholesale channel, the biggest obstacle is, I mean, we watch Shark Tank all the time. People show up and they are asked, okay, do you have a PO for it? Did you? No, they talk about how they met the buyer and the buyer's so interested. So do you have a PO for it? No. Why not? Because we didn't want to take it. Why? Because we couldn't produce it. We don't have the money. So, so you have this cash crunch that comes in. Only this is just to produce it. You don't have the cash. Then to wait another 3 months to get paid. So the cost of that. So that's number one. So that's the part that has to be because there is a cost for this. So number one. Number two, so the argument about selling through Amazon versus selling on the website, yes, you don't want to be relying on Amazon only, for sure. I always advocate start on Amazon so that you learn doing business online, because it needs different kind of disciplines, different kind of infrastructure. Put that in place without having to worry about pick, pack, ship, and customer service and all that stuff. So, so therefore, it's a good place to start, but it's not the only place to sell. Add the website, but that calculation that says, well, you're paying 15%, so to save the 15%, sell it also on your website. Now, that's also a little bit of a short calculation of the costs that come with selling on your website. So, okay, I always say this is actually on my website, and it's titled Online Retail Challenge. So it goes like this. If you want to sell on your website, it's a front-loaded operation. That means you have to build a website, you have to optimize it, you have to pay a lot of money to make sure that it has all the looks, bells and whistles that consumers want, which, by the way, keep changing all the time. New things come out. So you have to have all that. Let's assume that you have all the money to do that. Then it has to have a back end, tie back to the management, inventory, blah, blah, blah. So let's assume you have that too. And then these things take time. So you're going to have to spend a long time dealing with, you know how it is, dealing with developers. So let's assume that you have all the money and then you get it all done in a week. Now comes the next thing. Okay, you need traffic. Okay, well, that doesn't happen overnight, and it doesn't happen cheap. You have to keep pushing traffic. So let's assume you have all the money, and then let's assume you get it done in a week, and you've got now traffic coming. The next question is it qualified traffic? What is your conversion rate? So conversion rate is very hard to achieve for a new website. Is it website behavior? Is it product? Is it price? Is it our message? Colors, whatever. So let's assume you have all the money to get the best conversion rate. So now all these things, obviously, we cannot make these assumptions because they're not real, but let's assume they are real, knowing that they are not real, which means that you are already committing to the fact that you're going to spend a lot of money, spend a lot of time, only to have to deal with more things that will cost time and money. And we know that that's going to be the case. But for the sake of argument, let's say that we are successful in achieving those things within our means in a desirable amount of time. What's the best thing that can happen? You get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of orders. Now, do you know anybody who starts a business who is happy to be receiving so many orders every day, day after day? I mean, it's a nightmare. Now you need pickers, packers, there's theft, there's stuff, there's people getting sick, and this is your best case scenario. Now, am I advocating against? No. What I'm saying is, don't think that that 15% will be saved. You're gonna spend God knows how many times that 15% without making a dime. There will be nothing you'll be spending up front, and then after you spend up front, things are happening. You're gonna spend a lot more because you're gonna have to hire people, anticipating the order volume, blah blah. So if somebody said to website owners, I'm gonna send you enough qualified traffic, and you don't have to worry about all the fulfillment stuff, and I'm gonna charge you so much per order, you would happily take it.
Yep.
So that's why I say be careful about saving that 15%, because it will have other costs associated with it. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, and I think, Nick, that's why going all the way back to the beginning is, I mean, this is the brands that will endure are going to have control and consistency within an omni-channel approach, because every single one of the channels has a problem. We didn't even talk about in the economic model what it's like to have a distributor. There are distributors and retailers and online marketplaces and direct consumer websites. They all have different margin profiles. They all have different requirements. Amazon's barrier to entry is really low relative to these other channels. So you certainly, if someone asked me, you have only $20,000 and I want to manufacture a product and I want to sell it somewhere, you're basically only going to have success taking that to Amazon. Now, again, it's going to be super competitive because the barriers are so low to entry that you and everybody else with $20,000 are going to try to do that. So it's going to be an intense competition, but you can only go so far with $20,000. And a website, you could spend all that making your website look halfway decent, and you'll have no marketing dollars to drive any traffic, or you won't have built a brand. So I think Amazon allows you to get in the game. Right. But it is also, and there's 50% plus of the traffic. There's all these eyeballs. These are all good things, but that also makes it relentlessly competitive. I mean, there's all the YouTube videos of the overnight success story that I launched an FBA brand on Amazon, and now look at me with my Lamborghini. The fact is, there are 10 times as many. I threw my life savings at a project, and now I've got a garage full of garden claws or, garlic presses. It's like, FBA, if you were into FBA 8 years ago, it was a lot less competitive. The market is creating much more higher barrier to entry because of the intense competition. I mean, I've seen, people track the number of new selling accounts on Amazon. There's like 1,000 new selling accounts every day. That is a lot of competition coming from giant manufacturers all around the world trying to get on Amazon, and you're trying to solve it with $20,000. Just understand what you're getting yourself into, that you're going to have to spend time somewhere to make up that value. Yeah. And Amazon's a great place to start.
Yeah, it's a great place to start. Learn the game, develop the disciplines, build the infrastructure, and at that point, start looking. And I would say that don't look in the direction of physical stores, pursuing buyers, unless and until your brand is well established. Yes. You have cash and your price controls, because these things take time to develop. Your price controls are in place. You've got a pretty good handle on who else is selling on Amazon. You have a pretty good way to detect any unauthorized sellers. You got your processes in place. I want to share with you and the listeners one of my previous guests, who her name is Jessica. She runs the operations for Grandpa Beck's games. Perfect story, perfect example. I would, urge anybody to listen to it who's thinking about selling to physical stores. What a visionary the Grandpa Beck was, because he created this board game, and right from the get-go, he said, we're not selling anywhere else but online, but on Amazon. Yep, that's it. They built the whole brand. They added more products, they established the company, and then 8 years or so later, they decided to sell to physical stores.
Yep.
But at this point, their pricing is well established. And I said to her, and by the way, they have watertight agreements with anybody they sell to. They don't sell to distributors. And they have watertight agreement that says rights to sell online are excluded from this agreement. So the items cannot be. And I asked her several times, what do you do when somebody sells your item on the same listing? She says, well, that's usually either Amazon selling return item or somebody who purchased it from us with a discount or something along those lines. And we don't allow it. So I was constantly pushing, but what about stores? You know, there's no. And then she basically said, no, we don't allow. There is nobody else sells it except us. So that is a great strategy, and I would recommend that to everybody. That means that you can sell to physical stores, just not right away. And then, you know, you maintain what you started the episode with, control. You maintain control, and control is all about demand, supply and demand. And you keep the supply low, well, the demand goes up. So it's obvious, right?
Well, and I'm sure, again, for Jessica's story right there, that takes, you said the word earlier, that takes discipline. I'm sure that business gets constantly approached by somebody willing to buy a truckload of inventory if at just the right price. And they are smart enough to say no, because they know that that will just find its way back online. So they turn down the immediate sugar high of a big order for the long-term sustainable business. That means they are successful on Amazon and they've got a great ecosystem of reliable retailers that understand if they break the policy, they'll never get that product again for the history of that retailer. So now it's a level playing field. They've got control and everybody knows they're not messing around. So I think it's a great story. So I think Amazon can be a great place for a startup to launch their products. Maybe even Kickstarter gets them going with an audience that's more interested in novel ideas. Go from Kickstarter, take it to Amazon, but you said it well, Nick, build the brand and build the brand on Amazon. And with that brand equity, start to inch that price up, because if you have any hope of getting to retail ever, you can't be the cheapest online, because making 10% on Amazon, there's no room for a retailer. Making pennies, they're not interested. So you're going to have to be making 30, 40% margin on Amazon if you have any hope of a buyer ever taking you seriously in a retail store.
Yeah. Well, this is, I mean, we talked very high level, but obviously this is what wins the war. We want to win the war, not the battles. But you have the wrong strategy for distribution, channel strategy, pricing strategy, discount strategy. These are the things that hurt companies for the long term. It's very hard. The damage sometimes is irreversible. So this was great. So Corey, let's now get to know you a little bit. So
sure.
My typical style, the listeners know at this point, is I go way back to the beginning. Where did you grow up? And let's start there.
Yeah, I grew up in the middle of nowhere in Southern Oregon, of all places, on 40 acres between two small towns. The nearest grocery store was 45 minutes away. So it's kind of funny to take my wife and kids, now that we live in a suburb of Portland, Oregon, down to the middle of nowhere. And it's, what do you mean you only shop once a week for groceries? Well, it's like, well, it was a long ways away. So started in a small town, then came up to the Portland area for school, went to the East Coast, learned some things, in the e-commerce space, and fell into Amazon by helping, using the healthcare industry of all places with McKesson and Cardinal and the dropship network, and kind of learned the hard way 10 plus years ago what it meant to sell on Seller Central. And from there, it was all about how to help brands be successful if they just focused on Amazon with a very specific strategy for what Amazon demands overall. So started from a small town, traveled across the country, and here we are.
So started in a small town, traveled across the country, and you're back where you were, very close anyway.
Yeah.
So according to physics, the amount of work you've done, it's calculated It's close to zero, right?
The amount of
So,
you could ask an ROI question there, I guess.
no, I mean, clearly, physics don't calculate intangible. So,
Mhm.
so I mean, that's fine, but I'm more interested in your early days in terms
Yeah.
of, uh, so small town, 45-minute, was it 45-minute walk or 45-minute ride to the nearest grocery
Is
store?
45-minute drive to the nearest grocery
45-minute
store.
drive.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming until you started driving, you would never be, you would never go to the
Oh yeah,
grocery.
it was quite the pilgrimage. Oh yeah, we're gonna go to town. I went to elementary school at a K through 8 that only had 30 kids in it. So like we had a big class of kindergartners when I started, and it was a class of 5. So it
Lots
is
of fun.
class of 5 kindergartners was big for a school of 30. So that it was, I think it instilled confidence in communicating with people of, different backgrounds, much different experience levels. When you're 5 and you can talk to a middle schooler, I think of my kids now, they don't even go to the same school as kids, 8 years older than them. And that was just like, that was lunch, I sat across the table from 12-year-olds as a fifth,
So,
a kindergarten.
so I'm going to assume you're not easily intimidated.
I guess maybe that's maybe where the entrepreneurship all started, is if you can hang at the schoolyard with the 7th and 8th graders, and the things don't intimidate you too much after that, I guess maybe at an early age.
So, I mean, that's where I'm going. So I want to, because you're an entrepreneur, you're running your own company, space like Amazon, you have to be innovative all the time. So
Mm-hmm.
what was the early sign for you to be becoming this?
Yeah, so I think a big one, and I think about this, if someone were to ask, like, what would you do to help a young entrepreneur be successful? It may be a little unorthodox, but along the way, I got a summer job doing door-to-door sales. Totally unrelated. Like, I was this was when I was back east for a little while. I worked in the outside of the Baltimore area, door-to-door sales, selling office supplies of all things. So I was in a 3-piece suit trying to sell copy paper. And I had to go to 60 to 70 different doors every day without being introduced. There was no plan. You just had to go to these businesses.
How old were you?
I was 22 at the time.
But you went too far. I mean, before, I'm talking as a kid.
Well, I mean, as a kid, I guess it was sports and competition, and those were all good. Like, I've always been inspired to win. I guess business is like a grown-up version of sports to a certain degree. But to how that plays out in the business world and the tenacity to press through, try doing 6 months of door-to-door sales and being turned down a lot. Like that'll teach a lot of how to deal with your, rejection, peeling yourself off the pavement. I mean, all the entrepreneur cliche is, if you just expect to get your yes on your first call or your first intro, your first meeting with a buyer, I mean, you haven't done the entrepreneur thing yet. You haven't been rejected enough to press through. If the first no makes you want to quit. So find ways to press through, I guess, would be a way to suggest it.
So that finding ways to press through, is that something that you were doing as a kid? Or how were you able to do that?
Growing up, I did like endurance athletics. So I swam. So that there's something to, I guess that's a grind, I guess, is you train for, once a week race, but the training is miles and miles every day, back and forth the length of a pool. I mean, there's just, you said the word earlier, there's a discipline to getting up before school and swimming 3 or 4 miles before anybody else has even, gone to their first class. So that, like, those between the daily double in the pool before and after school, swimming, 6 to 8 miles every day, rain or shine, cold or warm. Those are, I guess you could connect it all. You could connect it all the way back to, us being.
What got you started in doing that?
I was good at it. I try, like my parents pushed me to try the sports. And I really enjoyed that. And I was I was good at it, but I also enjoyed the challenge. I think I like that in some of the individual sporting nature of, if you put in the work, you see the reward. I really like that. Like, I'm willing to do the work that most people won't. It's easy to do work hard for a week, but can you work hard for a month? Can you work hard for a year? So that, like, that willingness to put in the work and then to see the reward that comes from that, that, I guess it's, be it being a kindergartner at school, being at, in the pool throughout, or in entrepreneurship in life, is if you put in the work and then you're rewarded for that effort. I'm kind of addicted to that, the putting in the work and then seeing the reward over time.
So it's interesting to hear the word addicted, because that's how it is. So what I want to ask you is, when did you first taste that?
There was first one of the early, when I started swimming, the first few months I just started to train. It's early in high school, and I didn't do any races. I just trained, and I was not good compared to everybody that I was swimming with. But then for probably 4 months, I swam every day training with this group. And then I went to my first meet. And when you go to a swim meet, you register your previous time. And I didn't have any times. So I was in swimming, the fastest swims in the middle lanes and the slowest are on the edge lanes. And I was in a heat of relatively slow swimmers because I had no time. So they put me in with a heat as the slowest swimmer. And so I jumped in, but I trained for these months. I jumped in and beat everybody by 5 or 6 seconds on a minute long race. And so that was a moment where it was like, I had no quote unquote signal of success for those 3 or 4 months, but I put in the work. And then the moment that I had an opportunity to compete, I went from the perceived slowest to the fastest by a significant margin. Now it's on, and now put me in a pool with a faster group so that I can try to beat them too. And it's one foot in front of the other. And there was certainly a reward to all that effort. 3 or 4 months kind of, that was 11 or 12 probably was when I did that. And then it's like, wow, you're onto something here. If you put in the work, you can win the race. And it certainly got harder, but that was a big part of it.
Yeah. And you're still swimming.
I swim less than I like, but that comes back to
swimming through life.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, that's yes. The amount of time I put my head in a pool is a lot lower. But I guess life, 4 kids and a business is plenty.
Yeah. I mean, this is the part that I love about it. It's something that I was told a long time ago. Obstacles are not in front of us to stop us, to test us, to figure out a way to go over it, under it, around it. But one way or the other, we're going to keep pushing forward. Mm-hmm. So I think that at the age of 11, 12, obviously at the beginning, it's hard and everything. But then once you taste that reward, then you know that obstacles from that point on, there's just a way to test you. It's not there to stop you. And you getting into the Amazon space is, it's not easy. I mean, it's very hard. It's getting harder. But, no matter how much harder it's getting, whoever I speak to who's good at it, they don't even blink. They're just ready for it. And then, you just figure out, okay, how do we do this? How do we do that? Instead of, oh my God, what do we
yeah. Well, I think maybe we're stubborn, Nick, but it's the grass is always going to look greener on the other side. Like it's always going to look easy. But then when somebody comes in the industry we're part of, it's like, it ain't as easy as it looks, so it's tempting to change. It's tempting to go after the next get rich quick scheme. But I think maybe life has shown me that if there's value in the pursuit, and there's no such thing as an overnight success. No matter how successful I was in swimming or, AMC Atlas will be, it's from a tremendous amount of work before anybody even notices. And maybe 3 or 4 months.
I will respectfully disagree with you. I think there is overnight success after about 8-9 years of hard work.
Yes. Yes. Funny how that the first 8.5 years of the 9-year run that nobody pays attention to. It's just look at what you did the last 6 months.
Exactly. Well, this was great, Corey, and thank you for the story. I really appreciate that determination. So tell us, how can people reach you? Share your contact information with us.
Yeah, if a brand or an entrepreneur finds themselves where they're trying to get control of Amazon, or they want to grow their business, I mean, that's what we do at AMZ Atlas, is we help brands be successful, especially in, build control for them, so that all their customers are thriving. And you can get a hold of me by Corey, Corey, at amzatlas.com. Or that's what we're in the business of doing, is helping brands reach their peak performance on Amazon and certainly be successful off.
Great. Thank you for being here, Corey. Great
Nick, I
conversation.
appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And this brings us to the end of another episode, and I'll see you on the next one.
If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the episode, and share it with someone you think would benefit from it too.